All right, so today let's do a series of titles, okay? And let's pretend these titles are going to come up inside a shape and then progress one through another. So like if your person's talking on screen and they're doing a list of features of something and you want to be able to flash each one of those up at as the person saying it. Um, so let's start by creating a new composition. So I'm going to just click on this right here because it's the first one. Um, I'm going to set the, well, this is fine, this HDTV 1080 2997. That's fine. And I'm going to call this master comp because we're going to create a few pre-comps that this master comp will house. So click OK. So I've got my 1920 by 1080 screen here. And now let's create a rectangle for the title to exist inside. So I'll click on my rectangle tool and just draw a rectangle here in the middle of the screen. Okay, sound good? I'm going to turn the fill off, so I'm going to click on fill and get rid of that, say no fill. And then I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, change the color of this to something easy to look at. So there. And just for the fun of it also right now, I've done this before, but on this shape layer, I'm going to add this add arrow right here will add these different properties to the shape layer, but that also exists down here when you create your shape layer. You can add, and I'm going to add the trim paths. Okay, and I'm going to twirl open trim paths and set a keyframe at the start and the end. I'm going to grab both of those keyframes because this is where I want my animation to end up. And I'm going to nudge them by holding down Option or Alt and Shift. And then my right arrow will nudge it over 10 frames, another 10, and another 10. So on a 2997 timeline, that will be about a second. Okay, so it's going to take a second to do this. And now what I'm going to do, let me just scrub these over. I'm going to scrub this over till it goes to 50. And then scrub this one down till it goes to 50. Okay. And I don't like that it's starting in the corner and going up to the other corner. I actually kind of want this to go from side to side. So the way I can change that is change the offset so that it'll straddle the side and go around like this. And of course, you know I love, love, love having lots of ease, 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 right? So I'm going to add my ease by hitting the function key and then F9, or if you're on a Windows machine, it's just F9. And then I'm going to zoom in on those two keyframes a little bit and go into my graph editor, which is right here. So click on the graph editor, and I'm just going to drag these handles this way to add even more intensity to that. And now this is what it looks like. Okay. Now what I want to happen is inside this rectangle, I want some text to start showing up. But I want that text to only show up inside this rectangle. So there are a couple of different ways I can do that. I can pre-comp text on a comp that's exactly the same size as this rectangle. And the way to find that out right now is if I go to the rectangle, twirl that open, twirl this open, it's 995 by 191. So I can make a pre-comp that's that size and then have my text do any sort of animation within that comp and it'll only show up there. Or I can duplicate this rectangle and use it as a track map for all the text layers. For right now, I think it'll be easier to make a text comp So I'm going to hit Command N for a new comp, and I'm going to make that comp these numbers, this 995 by 191. So 995, whoops, let's not constrain those proportions. 995 by 191. Okay, so if I click OK, I now have a comp that's the same size as that rectangle. Now, if I hit Command T to create a new text layer, I can just click in here anywhere. I'm going to have the paragraph settings be centered. And I can just type in Title 1. Is great. All right. And then you can just change your text settings. Now, if you're doing a list, I'd probably start with your longest title first, which something like that. That way, you know that your longest title is going to fit within this rectangle. So I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller so that it fits comfortably. That way, anytime you create a new title, you know that any title from then on out is going to fit within this rectangle, and you won't have to resize the rectangle later on. So how do I want this to move? Do I want it to just slide in from here, move out of the way, have the next one come up? Do I want it to slide in from the side? Do I want it to rotate in like a 3D layer? Any votes? Rotate in like a 3D layer? Yeah. Okay. All right, so we got to make this a 3D layer. So let's click on this 3D layer box to make it 3D. And because I'm just made this 3D, I want to take a look at this from two different views. So I'm going to click on my view drop down and do two views. Horizontal is fine. Now there are a couple of ways to do this. I want it to look like all the titles are moving in tandem. So I'm going to grab this anchor point. So if I just, for example, let me show you. If I just rotate this on the X, it's kind of, the anchor point right now is on the baseline of the text. And I want it to look like it's kind of rolling on the outside of a cylinder. So I need this anchor point to be pushed back this way. I think I can do that just by grabbing my Move Behind tool, which is Y on your keyboard. It's this tool up here, this Move Behind tool, or Pan Behind. And I can, I think, just grab the Z handle and push that anchor point directly backward. That way now when I move the X, I'm still getting that rotation, the feeling that it's rotating, but it's kind of rotating up and off the screen. Okay? So let me do that again. If I hit Y, this view over on the left, this is my top view. So I'm looking at this from the top. All right? So if I hit Y, which activates my Move Behind tool or my anchor point tool, and grab this Z handle and push it up this way, that is moving the anchor point back. So it's kind of like putting it on the end of a stick. Okay, and the stick is this invisible pole that's connecting this text to this point right here. Okay, so now if I rotate, it rotates around that point instead of rotating on itself. Okay, is everybody sort of with me? Do I need to pause for a minute? Okay, so we need to keyframe that rotation, right? So I'm gonna, because this is face front, I know this is where I want it to end up. I'm going to go ahead and just turn on the X rotation keyframes by clicking on the stopwatch. And I want this to rotate in pretty quickly, so I'm just going to hold down Option Shift and right arrow, nudge that over 10 frames. Okay, so it's going to be a real quick rotation in. Now I'll rotate it down this way. Yoink. Sound good? So now it's coming in. And I want it to stay there for however long the person is talking. So I'm going to click the diamond next to the X rotation value to add another keyframe later on. And I can adjust the timing a little bit later. So now I need to move my playhead forward 10 frames so it can rotate out. So to nudge your playhead forward 10 frames, Command and then Shift and then your right arrow. Or, sorry, I learned this a long time ago. You can do page up or page down. So you can hold down Shift and page up and page down to move your playhead 10 frames also. Okay. Kind of old school that way. All right, now we need to change our X rotation and rotate it up this way. And you know me, I love, love, love the ease, ease, ease. So I'm going to just select the 2 middle keyframes because I want it to start in moving fast and then settle into place and then start out and then move out with some ease. So I'm just going to grab these 2 middle keyframes. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see. 2 middle keyframes, right click on them, go to Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. And now, because I've got 2 keyframes that I've grabbed right now, I can go in and change the velocity of those without changing the graph by hitting Command Shift K. And that'll allow me to increase to like 70% the influence of those eases. Okay, so I just did it with the graph editor, and now we just did it with actual punching in values. Okay, so one's more of a how is this going to feel, and the other one is like I like the way 70% or 80% looks. 100% is like the strongest whip, and with only 10 frames of animation, it wouldn't even look like it's moving. It would look like it's just appearing from nowhere if you did 100. That's too much for that short of an animation. Okay, so in and out. So we've got title 1. Next up, if you want this to be a list, you can just do this manually, duplicate the layer, the text layer, set this as the beginning, or maybe a few more frames, and then change this title. Title 2, whoops, 2 is 2. Now we've got this one flipping in, flipping out, next one comes in. Okay. And then if you just keep duplicating, shifting the title over, you can do your full list. Okay. And then I would keep the interval just even on all of them and then use a time remap to change the timing of them in the pre-comp. So we've got our comp 1. I'm going to go up into my program or my project panel, hit my hard return and rename this titles. So let's go back to the master comp and drop the titles comp into it right over that rectangle. And you'd probably want to have the titles below the rectangle so that if they, the reason why is as that rotates out and gets toward the top, it is covering part of the border of that rectangle a little bit. So that's why I would stack it below. That way it wouldn't show up. And now you've got kind of this rotating thing happening inside. Like this. Okay. Is that kind of what you were going for?
Yeah.
Is that exactly what you were going for? Or a little different? Did it give you the ideas you need to do what you need? Okay. There's a second way to do this. If I make this 20 frames and this 20 frames, I'm just nudging those out a little bit. I can, at this point, take the keyframes away. Like if I'm just doing one move and I want these to move exactly at the same time as one another, then with this first title in its out point and the second title in its in point, I can now tie these together. So I'll make title 2 follow title 1. That way title 2 will move at the exact same speed as title 1. But I'd probably want to add ease to all of these. Then select all of them, Command-Shift-K, and then make them all 70. Okay. So now title 2 is getting its rotation settings from title 1. Then what you do when you want title 2 to rotate out is you take these second 2 rotation keyframes from title 1, copy, paste them onto title 2. Then you can duplicate this one, and then that rotates out, have the next title follow this title, and it actually kind of goes a little bit faster. Okay. Fun, right? Super fun. All right, I'm going to save this because I'm going to use it for the rest of the demo. Save it as, what's today? The 4th. April 4th demo. I'm just going to save this in documents for now. I don't have my external hard drive connected at the moment. All right, next thing we're going to do. Let's go to our master comp and let's tie the titles so that no matter where this shape layer goes, I'm just going to call this rectangle 1. So that no matter where rectangle 1 titles is going to follow. So let's drag the parent pick whip from titles to rectangle 1. So now anywhere I move rectangle 1, that title, I can now keyframe this rectangle to move anywhere I want, and those titles will follow and do their animation within. Okay. All right. Now, let me get my thoughts together. All right, okay, let's do another pre-animation. We're gonna make a ring out of a solid layer using 2 masks. And the reason for that is I want those masks to animate independently, different than what you would do with a stroke. Okay, so let's make a new comp again. So Command N for new comp, and this one let's make that HDTV setting. HDTV 1080 2997. So far everything's been 30 seconds long, so that's fine. And I'm going to call this one ring. Ooh, such a creative name. And then I'll make this one square pixels. This needs to be HDTV 1080 2997. There we go, 1920 by 1080. So click OK. And now we're going to make a new solid. What's the key command for making a new solid? Command Y. You are correct. All right, because we're at Weaver State, let's make it purple. All right. Yes, we'll just let this be the comp size. So click OK. Now I need to make, I'm going to make 2 ellipses. So 2 different ways to grab your ellipse tool. If I hit Q, that'll activate my shape tool, which is right now it's my rectangle tool. So if I hit Q again, it'll cycle through rounded rectangle, hit Q again, ellipse tool, hit Q again, polygon tool, star tool, rectangle tool. Okay. So I'm going to make a perfect circle right about middle. Okay. All right, so I've got a circle. With that mask, I want to now make a duplicate circle or a second circle that's going to be smaller, but it's going to have a setting that'll knock out the middle of this. Okay, so the easiest way for me to do this would be to duplicate that mask. So if I go down to my timeline, my mask is right there on my layer. Select it, hit Command D to duplicate it. Then, because it's selected down here, I can hit Command T to transform it. The other way, so I get my transform box. The other way to do it would be to double click on it in the composition panel, and that will, if you double click on any point on a mask, you can activate the whole mask for transforming it. So I want to constrain proportions by holding down Shift at the corner and dragging down this way, but then I also want to hold down Command or Control to make it come in on the center of itself. Okay. And then when I let go of the mouse, I can let go of my fingers on the keyboard, hit return, and then we have 2 masks, one smaller than the other. Now we need this second mask to knock out this middle bit. And I always just remind myself how to do this by, I click on mask 2, I think it's subtract, and there. The best way to know how this add subtract versus inverted, not inverted, if I invert both of these, they're gone. Do an add on that one, do a subtract on that one, do a not invert on that one. There, now I got the opposite. Okay, so there's different things you can do when you mess with the add and subtract and difference and invert and not invert. So this is what I'm going for on this. Okay, so now what you can do is you can animate this mask to do stuff inside the other one. You can also, if you change the size of it, so this is like a nice looking moon, right? So we got this moon shape. You can animate this mask to go this way. So the reason why I'm doing this, I could so hey Scott, why don't you just make another black solid and move it in front? Well, the reason is this is the actual shape I'm making with this, with having 2 masks. The other way to do this would be to just make another circle and use it as a track mat, so that as the one circle passed in front of the other circle, it started to intervene, I guess is a good word. But so there's a lot of different ways to do this. This is the method I'm choosing for today. All right, so I'm going to select mask 2. Actually, I'm going to undo a whole bunch, get that back in the middle. Because I want to animate these masks. To activate keyframes for your masks, did I tell you guys this already? Okay, there's a good hint. Activating your position keyframes is option what? P, right? And then rotation is option R. So what do you think it would be for masks? M, right? Option M or Alt M. Yeah, that does that. That activates your keyframes. So that activated it for that particular mask because that mask was selected. If neither mask is selected, but the layer is, if you hit Option M, it'll activate keyframes for all the masks on that layer. So there's a nice little tip for you. There, just earned you another $2 an hour at your job because you're that much faster. All right. So I want this to be my settling point again, but I activated those keyframes on the first frame of my comp. So I'm going to slide these keyframes over to 2 seconds, I guess, right there. And now anything I do with either one of these masks will automatically be keyframed. So let's just, for the fun of it, see what happens if I make this shape. Okay. That was an accident. I didn't really mean to do that, but that was cool, right? So if we kind of wanted to add a little bit more fun to this, we could make the outer mask kind of settle into its place sooner. So I can do that, and then I do an easy ease on both sides of the other one so that it can kind of change how quickly that eye forms into place. Let's see. Now going to mess with the graph editor a little bit. Okay, fun, right? It makes me so happy to animate. All right, so with that done, you can now, let's put that into the master comp as well. So let's go back to the master comp and drop our ring in here, right there. Let's try some stacking here. Put it below everything. That rectangle is definitely not in the center. Do you guys remember the key command for centering something on your composition? It's Command Home. So that puts it right in the middle. Oh, it is in the middle. You know what's not in the middle? My ring. Okay, so let's fix that. So let's go to the ring here. Right now, the anchor point is in the center, but I didn't draw my rings in the center. So what I'm going to do is, with my ring layer selected, hold down Command Option Home to move the anchor point to the middle of this, the weight of this shape. And now hit Command Home, and that'll put the ring in the center. All right. So now to go back up to my master comp, because I know the ring is in the master comp, I'm going to hit Tab, and that'll bring up my flow. And I can click on master comp to bring up the master comp. And there it is. Now I can change the size of this rectangle so that it fits within the circle or not within the circle. It's up to you. You can also, if you want to, add fill to this rectangle, but then you'd have to put the titles above it. Or you could duplicate the rectangle and, you know, so what I'm talking about here is if I duplicate the rectangle and put it below the titles but above the ring, I can fill that duplicated rectangle with black, and then it'll knock out the ring. But I would also need that second rectangle to follow the first rectangle so that everything still stays together and moves together. Okay. All right. So here we are. We got layers, right? Like ogres. After Effects is like ogres. It's got layers. All right. Now let's make some 3D stuff. Let's make all of these layers 3D. So I'm going to hit Command A and then change all of them into 3D layers. And now what I want to happen is I'm going to take this rectangle, and instead of making it scale bigger, I'm just going to drag it a little bit closer to me by grabbing the Z handle and pulling it toward me. Okay, so if I switch to my views, two views, that's what I did. I pulled it out in front of the circle or the ring. So if I look at this from my custom view, there it is from a little bit from the side. I just went like this. Whoops, wrong layer. So grab the rectangle. So I can push this back and it'll physically move back behind the ring or in front of the ring. Okay. I like to look at stuff from the top. All right, so let's leave that there for a second and do some stuff with our animating. Now at this point I could pre-comp the rectangle 1, the titles, and the rectangle 2 might actually be a good idea considering how many things are going on here. But I'm not going to do that quite yet. I'm just going to take all three of those layers and change the timing so that they don't start coming on until after this ring is pretty much built. So I'm just going to slide these three layers over this way. All right. Yes? Yeah. So the two rectangles and the text, they're all kind of moving together as one unit right now. But they're animating in, and I want to wait till after this ring is done coming in on its own before that rectangle builds in. So I just grabbed all three of those layers and moved them to the right to about 2 seconds. Was that the part you needed? Yeah. Okay. All right, now let's have some fun with this ring. Let's set, because we know that this is kind of done animating in at about 2 seconds. I'm going to do some stuff with it so that it gets right here. And so I'm going to add option P will activate some position. Option R will do some rotation. Okay, so now let's just go not back to the very beginning because there's no ring on the screen at the beginning. I wanted to have it be more like right here. So I'm going to add some Z rotation, and I'm going to drag it this way so that it's kind of moving backward, so it looks like it's scaling, and then also maybe some slight like X and Y rotation as well. Let's just see how it looks. Okay, so it's kind of skewing the image from our point of view. And then let's see. And then, you know me, I'm always adding the ease. So now, once I've added ease to all of those, I'm going to drag these first keyframes and move them back to the beginning so that without any ring on the screen, it can kind of move like that. I'm going to make this slide even farther this way. All right, fun, right? Let's do one more thing. This ring is moving like this, but right here, if I take this entire world and flip it around, it could be fun, right? So at this point, we got to think about what's following what. We have rectangle titles, they're following rectangle 1. Rectangle 1 is moving on its own, but if we want to flip this entire thing around, if I have rectangle 1 follow the ring, then it actually is moving a little bit as it's growing on. So at this point, that might be fun because it's moving a whole bunch. We could have it kind of grow in earlier. Do you like that look better? I don't know. Let me make it bigger. So I'm going to switch to one view. I'm just changing the timing of these rectangles and titles coming in. I think I might actually like this because what's happening with the black rectangle as it's doing its write-on as well is it's kind of revealing itself to us as a write-on. So it's kind of fun to see them all move together. And even though it's not super obvious, because the rectangle is out in front of the ring, but it's taking its movement from the ring, we are getting some perspective happening in relationship to the two objects. Okay, so it's kind of fun. Title 1 is great. So is Title 2. All right. Okay. We have a couple things we need to do. What do I want to do though? All right, let's add some lighting to this. So let's right click in some negative space here and select New, Light. This is kind of like the Weber logo bumper, right? Adding a light to this scene. So I do want it to be a spotlight. Intensity, I don't know about these yet, but we do want to cast shadows on this. Let's not make the shadow darkness 100%. Let's make it more like 50. And we can add a little bit of diffusion to it as well. So that looks good to me. Click OK. And now we have a stationary light with objects moving into it. So that tells me that that light's probably a little bit too close to the scene. So I'm going to go back to my two views and see where things are at here. And yeah, definitely the light's too close. So let's grab the Z handle on the light and pull it back so that we can see it. And we can still change the light settings by double clicking on the light. And now that it's in there, we can change the cone angle so that we do still have some fall off, but not quite as much. Then change the feather. So as of right now, we're seeing some gradient here, but we're not seeing anything coming from the shadows yet. We'll get to that, but let's put another new solid in here, put it in the background so we can see this whole scene. And now I'm going to make this solid 3D as well, but I want to push it backwards so that it's really in the background. And when you push something back away from view, it looks like it gets smaller, so let's just make it a little bit bigger. There. And it's the same color as our ring, so the way I'm going to solve that is I'm just going to change the opacity of it a little bit to make it darker. Now what we need to do is tell these layers to accept the shadows that the light is casting. And the way you do that is let me just twirl everything up for now. Let's start with the solid in the background. So if I twirl that down, go to Material Options, and then under Except shadows, that's on, so that's good. So let's twirl that up. Let's go to the ring. We want the ring to cast a shadow onto that background, so we twirl that down. Go to material options, twirl that down, and under cast shadows, turn that on. Now there's a shadow in the background. So do we need each one of these layers to cast shadows onto the ring? Or do we just need one because it's a rectangle? Probably just one. I'm going to just twirl down rectangle 1 and rectangle 2 so we can check something out. If we do rectangle 2, which is the solid one, it's the black one, then if we go to material options, cast shadows, then it's casting a rectangle, right? If I turn that to only, then it turns itself invisible, but it casts its shadow. Then if I turn that off, that's what it looks like. So let me go up to rectangle 1 and do it for rectangle 1, which is just the outline. Turn on cast shadows, and now we get just the rectangle in the background. So I don't know. It depends on what you want your final look to be. Because if we want the rectangle to knock out the ring, we could turn the rectangle 2 into a track map for the ring, which would look like this. Or like this. So I don't know. Depends on what you want to do with it. There are options. I'm going to do no track matte and turn that back on. Yeah, I didn't really like arrive at a decision for this beforehand. But we do have a little bit of a scene happening. Now I want to change that ring from that purple color to another green color. So I'm going to add the fill effect to it. So using fill, you can change any layer, especially if it's a solid color, you can change that into any color you want. Like it starts out as red, but let's change this to another green color. So do that. That's good enough for me. All right. Is that fun? Okay, now let me think about what I want to do next. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to add some particles that are going to come in and do like a little, come in kind of past the camera, but do a little ring around the inside and outside of our ring and then fly off the screen in sparkly beauty or funness. Both of those are very technical terms, by the way. I want to tidy this up because right now I've got my rectangle and my titles and my rectangle 2 as different layers. And just to simplify whether or not I'm going to accidentally grab these things, I'm going to lock the titles layer and lock rectangle 2. And then I'm also, just to keep it really simple, I'm going to turn them both into shy guys. We haven't really done this yet, but if I make those two little guys hide behind the ledge, then when I turn on shy guy, then they disappear from view. They're still there, but I'm not going to accidentally click on them and start mucking around with them because they're already doing what I want them to do. Okay, so that's just like a way to hide layers without, I mean, I could pre-compose them into one layer, but then I have to do the redraw thing where it breaks them back out into 3D layers, and both ways are inconvenient, so I just chose this one because we've never really gone over it before. All right, so let's, I have to make a new solid layer. So Command Y, and I'm gonna make this one black just because usually particle effects and stuff are put on black layers, traditionally. So let's click OK there. And we have a new flat solid layer that it's now covering everything. So let's build some particle effects on this black layer. So I'm going to go up to my Effects and Presets panel and start typing in particle. And I'm going to do particle playground. All right, now particles, no, this is not the right one. Yeah, this isn't the right one. Sorry. Particle world, that's the one I'm going to do. Because that other one doesn't do its position in 3D space. All right, so let's create the particles first. I'm going to solo the black solid layer because what I'm interested in right now is what my particles look like. So I've got this producer that's making these sparks. We could go to, let's change the longevity of these to be much shorter. So they're only going to be alive for like half a second. And then I want the producer, that's what the producer is the little point at which the sparks are coming out of, okay? So these are coordinates for our producer. So if I move this around, it moves the producer around in space, okay? If you increase the birth rate, it'll add a lot more. If you decrease it, it'll lower them. Physics will do different types of explosions. So we can make it twirly. Twirl might be kind of fun for this, actually. Vortex, that might be fun. Let's do twirly. No, twirl. There. And then we can also do resistance. So if we add resistance, then they don't move out as far. And then if we can do extra, which is kind of like if there was wind turbulence happening, it can affect the position of them. And then this extra angle thing will just does more stuff. You can also set a floor layer. So if you want the particles to like hit something, then we can do that. Let's maybe try to have them bounce off of the background layer. That might be fun. Gravity particle. Let's look at our particle. Let's turn this into a shaded sphere. And then let's make the size variation greater. Change the max opacity so they're not quite as bright. And then I'm just mucking around with them here. I don't even know what I'm doing. But we'll figure something out. These are so much fun to just mess around with. And because I want them to be kind of adding some sparkle as they fly through, my transfer mode for the particles and for the layer are going to be add. So as they're interacting with everything below it, they're just going to be making them brighter and brighter, everything that overlaps. So this is volumetric shading. I'm just going to crank this up because it'll be fun. And then, yeah, let's look at what extras have for us. Light direction, hold particle release. composite with original, random seed. Okay. Okay, we have a fun little producer there. Let's add, I'm going to add more, a little bit more resistance because I want this point to be flying around and then I want the trail of particles to be left behind. Okay, which means I don't want them to be exploding out too far. So let's just change my physics, turn my velocity down a bunch, and maybe turn the resistance down also. So they can fly away, but they're not going to fly as far, because if I turn that way up, then they're exploding. So let's try that. All right, now to show you what I mean by this, I'm going to do a quick position setting on the X. Just have it fly this way. So watch what I'm doing. Ooh. All right. And I think I've got too many particles coming out. So I'm going to change the birth rate to 1 instead of 1.7 so that there's less particles. All right. And it's possible maybe the longevity of ½ a second's too short. So let's make that 1 also. And then with gravity, if you add gravity, they'll fall. If you have it be 0, then they'll just stay wherever they are. I'm going to have my gravity be 0. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping all over the place. The point is, I want you guys to muck around with it, so it's yours. But here's the cool part. Under producer, we're going to set up a relationship so that they follow a null. Okay? So let's take a little breath here. All right, here we go. All right, so let's make a new null object, which is kind of the same way as you make a light and a camera. So right-click down in your timeline in the negative space, select New Null Object. Let's make this null object 3D because we're working in 3D space. So I already know that this null object is on the same plane as the ring, because the ring is the one thing that I haven't moved forward or back. Well, I've moved it forward and back, but its resting place is on the origin. So what we need to do is click on the, or hit P on your keyboard for your position. And now what we need to do is, in our timeline panel, we need to twirl down our effect for particle world. And we're going to have to move things around a little bit here. Because what we need to do is we need to say, the producer, you need to follow the X value of the position of the null, and the Y value of the Y of the null, and the Z value of the Z of the null. That way, in order to move our particles around, all we have to do is move the null around, instead of trying to grab the particle generator and move it around kind of in a virtual space. So the way we do this, it's just like setting up parent-child relationships. You hold down Option or Alt on your keyboard, select the keyframe for the X, okay? And this is where we start writing in equations and math. But After Effects has this nice little pick whip, so we can say whatever I point this to, that's the number, okay? So X, Y, Z, we're going to make the X follow the X, Alt-click the Y, drag this to the Y value, and then Alt-click the Z, and then drag that up to the Z value of the null's position, okay? So now it just says wherever the null is in this position, make it follow that. And so if I hit enter there, theoretically, my particles should have been generating right here, and I don't know why it's not. Hold on. Okay, figure out why that didn't work. All right, so what we have to do is, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to Alt-click the position of the X on the producer, drag that to the X value of the null. Then I'm going to do it to the Y value of the null's position. I'll click the Z and then drag that to the Z position. Okay, so our starting value of this X and Y, that was 0. So this producer is getting its coordinates for right here based on a 0, 0 value. So we need to compensate for that by saying everywhere this goes, it's following this, but it needs to do it by that minus 960 because that's where your null is right now. And then this one needs to be minus 540. Now I could, before setting up that relationship, see now wherever I move that null, that stupid thing didn't work again. Why? Oh my gosh. Hold on. All right, good news, everybody. We're going to scrap that. All right, let's just, we're not going to make it go. I was going to make it, here's what I was going to do. I was going to have the null fly in past the camera. We were going to take the mask paths and then paste it to the position of the null so that it could fly around this way, and then add another keyframe to the null and have it zoom off to the side. But because the values of this plugin aren't actually based on the coordinates of the comp, that relationship isn't working. So let's just add some keyframes to the position of this. Yeah, just delete the null. Alt select the X, Y, and Z positions of the producer and get rid of those, and we'll just keyframe this manually by look. I'm also going to composite this with original. So you can either composite it with original here and or go to your blend modes and make this add. So you got like double add there. All right. So let's have this come in right about here. So I'm at like 1.5 seconds roughly. I'm going to have this layer start right here. No, let's have it start at the beginning because I want these particles to already be coming out. All right, so let's just keyframe the X, Y, and Z positions of this. And let's find our starting point. So I want it to come from behind the camera, not directly behind the camera maybe, just like right here, and then back this way. Okay, so there's where it's going to start. So let's go forward about 20 frames and move the Z till it comes down here to about 0. And then have the X go here. And then the Y here. And then off the screen here. Let's see what that looks like. Ooh. Okay. It wasn't very exciting, was it? All right. So let's do some adjustments here. I see that my particles are kind of fading on. They're also totally stationary. So let's go to my velocity, their negative velocity. That's not good. Let's give them some positive velocity. Now you can kind of get a sense of what's happening to them. And then inherent velocity from the thing that's moving. And then also they seem to be fading in and then fading out. And that's probably a particle setting opacity map. Oh, see? So let's have that come in much faster. Or just have it be on and then let them fade out when they go away. Then birth size. Let's have the birth size be 0, maybe. No, that's not. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Pew. Well, that's weird. There's like a delay on that. What if I turn that up to a higher setting? Oh, that's not what I was going for. It's kind of cool though. Let's see. Resistance, extra. Maybe it's this extra thing. Let's see. Let's look at it back here, see what happens. Does anybody want to venture a guess as to why that's delayed? Maybe it's my twirl. Maybe I need to make this explosive. Let's try that. No, that's totally doing the same thing. Why? Particle visibility, floor action. I don't have anything here. That's weird. It's almost like I should reset this whole thing and start it over again. All right. It's like waiting to do its like extra move. Sorry? Longevity. Would that be longevity? Oops. Let's do 3. See, now they might just wait longer. Yeah. They're 0.3. I like that a little better. All right. Ooh, look at that line. Well, there's all sorts of fun stuff I can do with this that I didn't know. All right, let's look here. Yay. Okay. All right, last thing I'm going to do, I probably should have done it earlier, is create a new camera. So I'm going to right click in here, create new camera. 50 millimeter is what we've been building this based on, because if there is no camera, it's actually a 50 millimeter camera. So if you don't want your scene to suddenly take on a different sort of look, leave it as a 50 millimeter camera. And I'm going to add a position keyframe to the camera and put that at the very beginning, and then go forward to 6 seconds or so and just push the camera forward slightly so that we get just a little bit of motion. And then, as always, ease that second keyframe. So as this entire animation's happening, whoa, particles. I need to make this come back farther. All right. There, now there's just like never-ending movement, just never stops. Well, that was like the worst demonstration on how to make a particle effect I've done in this class. I think my demonstration for doing the lower thirds, having some particles just kind of happening, that was a pretty good demonstration on one of the particle effects. Go to that one and watch that one. This one was terrible. All right. Thanks, everybody.